What do you do when the frame rate conversion needs a bit more manual input? In a previous video, I showed how to convert from a 2398 master to a 2997 broadcast master. I also explained the difference between full frame and drop frame timelines. Today, we turn up the difficulty and convert between 2398 and 25 frames per second. Now, the fact that we're going to a full frame format from an NTSC frame format makes this a more difficult conversion. So there are a couple of ways to tackle the problem. The original way is easy to do, but in today's world usually gets a failing grade from the QC houses. The preferred method, it's easy to get a clean picture, but what about the audio? That's another story. Okay, so we are inside Avid, and we have created a 1080p 25 frame project. And same as in our previous video, we want to create a project that matches the final resolution, frame rate, everything of what we are building. So inside this project, we've brought in the same piece we used last time, 2398 master show. We have also brought in a mix file. This would simulate if we just did the video and somebody else did the mix for us, an audio host did the mix. So we have set up 3 different bins here. We're going to look at a Protools version, a Reaper version, and a Resolve version. But before we do any of that, we have to get our video straightened out. And I said in the intro that there are a couple of different ways of doing this. The simple way is to simply let the edit program do a pull up or a pull down, depending on where you are going in your frame rate, to convert the video. In that situation, much like in the broadcast version we did, there is no audio frame rate or sample rate conversion needed. All the converting is being done in the video. So what does that look like? We'll take our show. We will cut it into our picture. All right, that was the mix. We'll take our show. We will cut it into the picture. And Avid automatically as to where I wanted the conversion. And having already tracked it, it's a little different. But what we're going to find now, the base setup from Avid, anything with motion, my hands are usually a good example.
This very
there's a lot of streaking going on. Now that is simply because Avid right now is set up to do a different, shall we say, cheap method of conversion. If we call up our motion adapter and we tell it to do both fields, we should get a better conversion.
This very basic tracking system effective this very basic tracking system can be. Today we're going to step it up a notch. We're going to look at
still quite a bit of stutter or jitter, and there's still a lot of motion blur. Obviously my fingers are going to have some motion blur as I move them around, but it's just not quite right. And if we step through the shot, we can see it's doing a pretty good job of interpolating those frames amongst themselves, but you do get those instances right here of double frames. And this is how it's doing its conversion. It's keeping the audio in sync, but it is duplicating a frame every now and then to make everything stay in sync. And that's how PAL used to happen. And what you'll find is a lot of spec sheets nowadays specifically say they do not want this kind of conversion to their frame rate. They want a frame-to-frame conversion. And that's where the audio goes out of sync. So how do you do a frame-to-frame conversion? Again, in our motion editor, call that back up. Rather than just going over here, we actually want to go to the Promote tab. If we promote this, it's going to go from a motion adapter to a time warp. And that time warp is sitting right now at 96%. If we click on our speed graph, we'll see the exact speed it's running at is 95.9%. This is how Avid is keeping the audio in sync. It's playing the video at 95.9%. And again, the QC houses, the foreign broadcasters, the foreign distributors, they want a 1-to-1 frame ratio on the picture. And to do that, we make this 100%. So that gives us our original picture playing back at, in this case, 25 frames per second. And that gives us a picture that is as clean here as it was in its original 2398. And you can see that the motion blur is just a little gentler on a lot of it.
This very basic tracking system can be. Today we're going to step it up a notch.
So we've got a really nice picture. The jitter's gone, the stutter's gone, we've got clean motion blur. But what also is gone is my sync.
We're going to look at the 4-point tracker.
But that is the picture. That is how you do the picture conversion on a 1-to-1 frame ratio inside of Avid. The audio we're going to have to take into a different program to get a nice quality from it. And we are going to start by going into a program called Reaper. We're going to take our mix file, the 2398 mix file that the audio engineer would have sent to us, and we're going to take that into Reaper and do the adjustment there. So we are inside Reaper. This is a nice, inexpensive program, and it's in that vein of a Pro Tools type program. There's lots of plugins you can use for it. There's a lot of plugins that come with it. It's a pretty powerful program. So inside Reaper, it's not a difficult program to maneuver around. We want to insert a media file, and here is our mix file. For Reaper to work, what we want to do is change the playback speed of this file. So if we call up the item properties, we can see the playback speed is set at 1. And we want it, much like our video is now running in Avid, we want it to run at a speed that helps us go from 2398 in the video world to 25 in the video world. I know, again, audio doesn't use frames per second, but when I talk about it, I'm going to use frames per second because that's how my brain works. I'm going to call up a calculator, and I'm going to take 25 frames per second. I'm going to divide it by 23.98 frames per second. And I'm going to get, actually I'm going to divide it by, I'm going to be a little more precise on this one. Let's go 25 divided by 23.976. And we do get a slightly different set of numbers, obviously, between 976 and 2398. And you probably could go even farther on the 976 at some point as to what the frames per second are. We're going to use this number for our playback rate. We are going to make sure we preserve the pitch when changing that playback rate. So this will make me not sound like a chipmunk. And we're going to say apply. And if you're watching, you'll see there was a little shift on the timeline. If we go to the end of the timeline, this little notch right here indicates where the timeline used to end and is now repeating. The length of the timeline is the exact same, or the length of the clip in the timeline is the exact same as the original. And what Reaper has done, because we have sped this clip up to get it to match our new frame rate, it has taken this amount of audio from the beginning of the file and repeated it at the end of the file to make up that space. So it doesn't just leave a blank chunk at the end of that space, it actually loops the file. So we're going to trim this back. We don't need that audio, so we're going to trim this right back to where that wedge is. And this is now a 25 frames per second
Today we're going to step it up a notch. We're going to look at the 4-point tracker. Not the planar tracker or the camera tracker. We're staying old school. 4-point tracker.
So with the pitch correction on, it sounds really good inside Reaper.
We have 3 different scenarios we're going to look at today.
So pretty simple actually in Reaper. Now all we have to do is export this. So we're going to go up to File, we're going to we'll do a render. If we were doing multiple tracks, we would do batch file or consolidate, export tracks rather. Since we just have one single track, we're just going to do a render. We're going to call up a very slow resample mode for a little higher quality, hopefully. We're going to set this to 48K. We are going to do a force wave here. Avid, I think Avid will have trouble sometimes bringing in some of these other wave files. And we are going to call this, find a place to put it here. And we will call this 25 conversion Reaper. And we will render that file. And this is a 22 minute piece. As you can see, it's going much better than real time. So it's a bit of a bounce, same idea as a bounce in Protools. It has to play through the file, but it's playing it back. Here we go, 38 times real-time speed. So that's not too bad. Okay, back inside Avid, this is the file we just made out of Reaper. Let's link to it into Avid. And we'll put it, I've made tracks for all 3 of the versions we're going to do, so we can do a bit of a comparison. And let's cut that on. So we immediately see that this file is quite a bit shorter than the original file, which is exactly what we want. Again, we are speeding up the video. We have to speed up the audio. Now, the video track itself does not look like it has sped up. It looks like it's in the original length. But in fact, what Avid is doing is holding on a freeze frame of the last frame of the video. We'll turn off the original. We know it's out of sync. Get to where this guy's on camera.
Showed how effective this very basic tracking system can be. Today,
so the sync looks good. It sounds great. The sync might seem out just because of the camera or the screen recording software, but it is in sync on my record monitor.
Today we're going to step it up a notch.
And if we jump to the end of the file,
there you go. 4-point tracker. Old school is still pretty good.
still in sync.
I have used Reaper on a few shows that have been shipped overseas, and they did pass QC without any issue. The one thing I have found is that I typically need to do all my audio tracks at once, stacked on top of each other at the same time, or sometimes they don't exactly line up perfectly in the NLE. But what if you want to use Resolve instead? Surely it can do the conversion.
Okay, we are in Resolve, and we have a bit of a decision to make here. We can just do the audio and send it over to Avid the way we did in Reaper, or we could do the entire process in Resolve. I don't do a lot of finishing in Resolve. I do most of my finishing in Avid. And it's not that I don't like Resolve. I love Resolve. I just don't like it for finishing. A lot of the times when I'm editing, I'm doing a lot of the graphics work, or I'm getting graphics work in and offline, and it's all being built inside of Avid at that point. I send my clean timeline to Resolve to color. I send that back to Avid. All the graphics are already all laid out. All the animations are laid out. All the timing is done. And then I export both a clean and a final texted version of the show from Avid. The other big thing really is I'm on a Windows box, and Avid lets me output ProRes from my Windows box where Resolve does not. And without getting into debate about whether ProRes is really any better than DNX, HR, that's what people ask for. this allows me to give it to them. So for me, I would be just as likely to export just the audio out of Resolve and bring it all back into Avid. For this workflow, we can certainly go down the road that we are going to do both. So I'm going to take my 2398 master. Actually, I'm going to right-click, create a new timeline from this. And as in our last video, I am going to change the format of this timeline to 25 frames per second. Now you can have a 25i. We're just doing 25p. It's the same workflow, really. Just know what your sequence needs to be. And that gives us our timeline in Resolve now that should also be out of sync.
How effective this very basic tracking system can
But
be.
it's not. So much like in Avid, we want to make sure this is actually running at a 1-to-1 ratio. So we're going to go back up to our 4-point tracker, the original movie, and we're going to call up the clip attributes on it, and we're going to tell it to play back at 25 instead of 2398. That takes it offline because the timing has changed. We can now drop this onto our timeline.
And we're going to show how this can be very useful for a lot of your screen replacement
the audio has not
needs.
changed, but
we
the
have three
video
different
has.
scenarios we're going to look at today. One seems basic, but there's some glare on one of the picture frame.
And if we want to treat this as though we were dealing with a layback, here's our layback that has been presented to us from the audio engineer, and of course
corners. So how do we use that glare to our advantage? We have another situation.
Resolve has not kept the length of the clip the same. It is ending the clip now at the proper position.
Mask.
And of course the audio is too long. So we have to speed up the audio in Resolve. Now we can do that in a couple of places. We can do that in Fairlight, which I am not very comfortable in. But for this process, it's simply a matter of calling up the inspector. We can also, as far as I know, just do it right in the edit window. We get the same items here. Somebody can certainly prove me wrong. I don't think there's any difference between doing this in the edit page or in the Fairlight page. So for me, in Fairlight or in the edit window, either way, we're going to click on the speed change, and we are going to change the speed while maintaining pitch correction. And if we were to go and let's call up our calculator again and go 25 divided by 23.976, let's speed it up to 1.0427. Let's try that. 104.27. If we go back to our audio and we zoom in on the end of the timeline, it looks like we're 1 frame short. If we slowed this down to 26, now it looks like we're a little long. No, we need 104.265. 104.262. 104.268. There we go. 104.268 appears to give us a clip that matches the video, even though it comes out here as 104.27. Not the most precise way of doing things, but let's see what we get.
Today we're going to step it up a notch. We're going to look at the 4-point tracker. Not the planar tracker or the camera tracker. We're staying old school. 4-point tracker, and we're going to show how this can be.
Appears to be in sync. Let's go to the end.
4-point tracker. Old school is still pretty good.
And there we go. Still in sync.
So now back to the original conversation about Resolve. It's just a matter of either exporting this entire thing as a movie with audio, or just exporting the audio, which in your delivery tab, again, you can export this as 25. You could export this as audio only, as a WAV file. That's what we're going to do, so we can bring this back into Avid for a comparison. And once we're done that, we'll go back into Avid and see how it sounds. Okay, we are back in Avid. Let's go to our Resolve bin. Let's bring in that audio from Resolve. And let's cut that into our timeline. We can see the length exactly the same as what Reaper gave us, so that's good. Let's just check out a sample in the waves, and we are just slightly different in the timing. Less than a frame, maybe a perforation, I don't know. And let's kill Reaper and listen to Resolve.
Showed how effective this very basic tracking system can be. Today we're going to step it up a notch. We're going to look at the 4-point tracker. Not the planar tracker or the camera tracker. We're staying old school.
So again, looks like perfect sync. And let's just go to the end here.
4-point tracker. Old school is still pretty good. As always, please like, subscribe, and leave comments.
Again, perfect sync.
Resolve is a great and possibly free way of doing these conversions. But as we saw with both Reaper and Resolve, we are left to calculate the conversion manually. Now this does work, but if you really want to get picky, it might not be a perfect conversion. That is where a product like Protools steps in.
Okay, inside Pro Tools. Now, I am not a Pro Tools person. I'm not an expert in Pro Tools by any stretch of the imagination. I have mixed a show in Pro Tools. That was in 1999, I think, 1998. That's how long ago it was that I really sat at Pro Tools and did anything. I know enough about Pro Tools to do this, and that's about it. But that's all I need it for. Let's import our audio. That would be the 2398 mix. Now, if we were to just add this clip, that is telling Pro Tools to read this clip off of our computer. Almost like a link. We don't want a link to it. We want to convert this clip. And in order to do that, we're going to copy this clip. This will create brand new media inside Pro Tools of this clip. But before we say to do it, we are telling it we want to do a sample rate conversion on this clip. And Pro Tools has been so kind as to give us all sorts of presets as to what we can change the sample rate to. And in our situation, if we go down to the bottom, they've actually given us pull up, pull down conversions as well. So we want to go from a 48 kilohertz sample rate, and we want to do a change. We are 2398, and we're going to PAL. So we have film to PAL. This would be if you're doing a 24 to 25 frame rate conversion. But because we're doing 2398, not 24, we're actually going to do a NTSC to PAL conversion. We're going to pick best quality, and we're going to say done. It's going to say where do you want to put it. We'll say you can use the folder you want to use. Asks where we want to do it. We want to put it into a brand new track. Brings in that track.
Not the planar tracker or the camera tracker. We're staying old school. 4-point tracker, and we're going to show how this can be very useful for a lot of your screen replacement needs.
Now, whether or not you can tell, I can tell I'm speaking a little fast there. Like a little, my pitch is a little high on that. So we are going to go in and do a audio suite change, and we're going to do a pitch shift. What kind of a pitch shift do we want to do? Well, again, there is math that you can figure this out on. What I find to be an easier way to do it is to use Google, which I did. And because I don't do this that often, this spreadsheet I've saved out as kind of a workflow for myself. And I've put, the process I just went through on Protools, as well as the pitch rates you might need to accomplish what you are trying to do. Because the process we're doing here is the same whether you're going from 2398 to 25, 25 to 2997, 24 to 25. It's the same process. You want to do a sample rate conversion and you want to do a pitch correction. So this chart is telling me for film to NTSC, no, we want NTSC to PAL. So we want to do a -89 semitone pitch correction. -89 semitones. 0.89 semitones is 0.89 cents or 89 cents. 100 cents is one semitone. We want to do less than a full semitone, so we want to do 0.89 of a semitone, which would be 89 cents. Pro Tools will not let me call up 89 cents here. It will only let me call up 50 cents. So we're going to do a -1 semitone change, which is more than we want to do. We've pitch correction changed a full semitone. We want to bring that back now another 11 cents. That will get us to that 89. 100 minus 11 is 89. This is 100 on the negative side. We want to go 11 towards the positive side. That'll give us our 0.89 semitones. We're going to say render it, and we want to export this. Multiple mono is fine. So let's go back into Avid, see what we have. Okay, and back in Avid, we have linked to the files from Pro Tools. We did get a left and a right, two separate files. So we'll cut those into our show. Again, our length matches up perfectly. And our waveforms, once again, we're just a little different from one to the other, not a full frame out.
Planer tracker or the camera tracker. We're staying old school. 4-point tracker, and we're going to show how this can be very useful for a long.
And the pitch sounds good. And at the end,
there you go. 4-point tracker. Old school is still pretty good.
Now again, the difference in the length, or not the length, but how the waveforms are lining up between these three different versions, they're all just slightly different from each other. And I'm attributing that to the process that we've applied to each. We've done speed changes on all of them. One of them through Pro Tools doing the sample rate conversion at a very specific preset for this type of workflow. That's why I like using Pro Tools for this. I'm not trying to figure out if it should be 1.04276 or 275 for a speed change. I'm saying to Pro Tools, I'm going from this to this. Take care of it. This is what it comes up with. So my preferred method is Pro Tools. I don't think any of these methods, and I've used the Reaper method and the Pro Tools method and sent them off. I don't think none of these methods are going to fail because they're not in sync. So there you have it. 3 different methods of ensuring your audio is in sync when doing a frame rate conversion. Now, if you want to do something other than 2398 to 25, you can certainly follow the same steps. You just have to adjust the math for the conversion you are doing. As always, please like and subscribe, and yes, please leave comments. I try to respond to everyone who reaches out. Thanks for watching.